In an age where machines and vehicles are seemingly designed to be disposable, Pacific's legacy reminds us that true craftsmanship stands the test of time. From humble beginnings, this small manufacturer, tucked away in the shadows of industry giants, redefined what durability and heavy equipment truly meant. In this video, I'll dive into the history of Pacific Truck and Trailer Company, exploring the stories and technical specifications behind the three models featured in Snowrunner: the P12, P16, and the P512. And of course, I'll be putting them to the test in their natural element, logging. So grab a drink, settle in, and get comfortable, because we're in for a deep dive. Not just a double feature, but a triple, with a full company history thrown in for good measure. And one more thing before I jump in. Normally I just link my sources in the video description without really mentioning them, but I have to give a special acknowledgement to Hank Rabe for being a wealth of knowledge on Pacific. It seemed like everywhere I turned I saw his name. He's written multiple articles on the company and trucks, and has an extensive library of photographs. A lot of the information I'm using for this video is pulled off of pacifictruckclub.org, which I feel like Hank is responsible for a lot of the media on that site. There's a huge library of pictures sorted by model and year, multiple scanned sales sheets, and promotional material. This site is really cool to look through, and I'll have it linked below for you to check out. I also really have to thank the heavyequipmentforums.com community. There was a thread I found all about Pacific trucks in the logging industry where, once again, I found Hank posting, and I reached out to him asking if I could use some of the pictures he's uploaded, and he was kind enough to not only say yes, but to let me know if I was looking for something specific. Thanks to him and a poster named Diamond T Guy who actually built these trucks, I can bring you guys verified photos of these trucks in most cases with some context behind them. I'll have this thread linked below as well, and I highly recommend scrolling through it. It's absolutely incredible. These aren't just fans of Pacific trucks, but guys that have actually lived it. People that used to work for these companies and have personal history with these trucks. They refer to them by their production and VIN numbers and like to try and keep track of old trucks the best they can. The pictures and stories they shared were amazing. The passion these guys have is awesome, and I just really encourage you to go look through this 120-page thread for yourself. And finally, if you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. Anyway, on to the video proper. For today's video, I'm in Wisconsin. I know, I put out my expansion review before actually finishing the map. I tricked you guys. But today, I'm going to be running a logging operation in Grainwoods River, transporting logs from the logging camp across the river to the sawmill to craft all the wooden planks I need to finish making the sections of train tracks. I figured, while the route might be short, its terrain is varied enough to be able to put all of the Pacific trucks to the test. I know I should be testing these trucks somewhere more thematic like Ontario or British Columbia since these trucks are Canadian, but I'm making these truck review videos as I play through the game, and I didn't want to jump ahead. Anyway, I have the P512 and P12 staged at the logging camp in Grainwoods River, ready to go, although this station only supplies medium logs, so the P16 is staged at the southernmost logging camp in Black Badger Lake, and it's going to be transporting long logs. While the P16 may seemingly have the easier route due to a large section of it being paved, it's going to come with its own set of challenges. I have the International Paystar 5070 set up as my loader, and the Paystar 5600 twin steer as a refueler, since I plan to do at least 2 runs with each truck. I'm going to move the twin steer over to the sawmill, since that will be the central point and make more sense to have all the trucks refueled there. While I do that, let me give you guys the history of Pacific Truck and Trailer Company. Pacific was founded in 1947 in Vancouver, Canada by 3 ex-employees of Hayes Trucks, Vic Barclay, Mac Billingsley, and Claude Thick, who within their first year of founding the company produced and sold their first truck, the EMAD, in May of that same year. The buyer of this first truck was Bowaters Pulp and Paper in Newfoundland, Canada, over 3,000 miles away from the factory. Not only is that an insane time frame to build a truck, but imagine buying the literal first car from a small startup and being across the country from them if anything goes wrong. I think that speaks volumes about the confidence Bowaters had in Pacific's craftsmanship and reliability right from the start. It's clear that the experience of the founders, who had worked for Hayes, another off-road truck manufacturer, was shining through. With the knowledge and skills they brought with them, these three men set out to surpass their previous employer. Their attention to detail and fierce commitment to building trucks that were not only reliable but easy to maintain paid off in spades. By the 1950s, Pacific had expanded to a larger facility and had a workforce of roughly 50 people. Even so, it would still take them around 2 months to fully build a truck. Pacific was founded on the principle of highly tailored and customized trucks. They weren't rolling off of an assembly line as fast as possible. They were built by hand, in stalls, in close contact with the customers that were ordering them. That's part of the reason why when you look up pictures of various models, they all look a little different. They all look a little off from one another. Pacific took customer service to a whole new level. They didn't just build trucks, they tailored them to perfection, often visiting job sites to understand exactly what was needed before a single part was assembled. I'll go into more specifics on some custom jobs and the lengths Pacific would go to later on. Pacific's slow pace of production meant that the company didn't produce its 500th truck until 1971, which was a P9 with a dump bed. This truck is still around and is actually owned by Edison Motors, or at least I assume they own it since they spray painted their name on the door. You can see this truck in their video where they also go over the history of Pacific trucks. Although they don't talk about the truck itself much, he just kinda sits on it while he talks. But he does point out the VIN plate that confirms it's the 500th truck, and I think it's awesome and amazing that it's still around all these years later. That's not the complete history, but I've got my twin steer situated at the sawmill. And I gotta say, I love the 5600. This 10x10 beast feels so good to drive, I can't wait to use it more. But anyway, time to get our first truck hauling, and I think I'll go from oldest to newest, starting with the old man, the 1964 P16. Towering over the competition, the P16 was built as tough as the forest it conquered, designed to endure and haul with unparalleled power. For this video, I downloaded a mod to give the P16 its iconic look of hauling an entire forest on its back. Modder TWM has an amazing log bunk mod that reskins the logs to look more iconic and appropriate for this truck. The mod comes with a new log carrier front and separate trailer, but it's not just a simple reskin. There are 2 versions of the trailer. A bulk version, which lets you pack multiple loads of logs, and the stock version, which makes it still only count as 1 load. I'm using the stock version for this video. Now, the larger logs also weigh more than the standard pack logs, according to TWM, but he didn't exactly say how much, but obviously it's balanced around this truck specifically. In addition, you can also winch the trailer up onto the rear of the truck and pack it in place to either simply not have to drive around with a trailer or to transport it on another truck. Remember when I talked about Edison Motors and their Pacific earlier? Well, Edison Motors is a Canadian company that's been developing an electric diesel logging truck nicknamed Topsy, and TWM also has a mod for that truck. I just thought it was kind of cool the way all that came full circle. Anyway, my P16 is equipped with its largest engine upgrade and the advanced special gearbox, so it has full range of low gears and high gear as well. Even though I have the DLC tire pack, I'm keeping the stock tires on because I think they look the best, and they have a slightly buffed traction rating to make up for the truck's lack of all-wheel drive. The first P16 was completed in 1963 and was sold to a company on Vancouver Island, although this truck looked considerably different than the P16 we have in-game. Most obviously in the headlight, fender, and bumper design. Our P16 is a later model, built in the mid-70s, and they were built that way until about 1989. The first model was a real state-of-the-art truck for its time. It had a 903 V8 Cummins, 12-foot log bunks, and a water tank for spraying the drum brakes to keep them cool. At the time this truck was built, it wasn't even officially called the P16. It was just another custom job for a customer. One that demanded a heavy-duty truck built out of 16-inch steel beams. Like steel girders, the stuff they make buildings out of. Hence where the 16 in P16 comes from. Not only did this make the truck's chassis incredibly durable and rigid, it also made it relatively inexpensive to make. When you think about it, Pacific saved a lot of money by using steel girders for their chassis instead of custom casting parts or modifying an assembly line process. By cutting and welding these girders together to fit their trucks, they had likely shaved thousands off of production cost. Now, getting a solid idea of how much one of these trucks costs new wasn't exactly easy. The price varied so much from model to model due to custom specs and equipment. Even trying to get price points on similar trucks was a bit tricky. Some discussions on forums and the Snowrunner IRL subreddit guesstimate that a large frame logging truck in that era was between 30 and 50,000 Canadian dollars. I couldn't find any leads except for this one picture I randomly found on Flickr of a 1967 Hayes HDX, where the caption says that one of these trucks and trailers new was 51,000 Canadian dollars. Let's round up to say 60,000 for the added custom mods and equipment, and a new Pacific would cost about 450,000 Canadian dollars in today's money. That was a testament to Pacific's quality and customer service. They were seen as an expensive yet worthwhile investment. Many of these trucks far outperform their expected lifespan, and you can find plenty of Pacifics for sale on sites like supplypost.com, ranging from 40 to 150 Canadian dollars. These aren't restored or collector models either. These are trucks that are still in working order, worn and dirty, ready to continue hauling. The P16 actually really impressed me on this logging run. The first quarter of the P16's route is really the only challenging bit. There's some deep mud, a river crossing that went up to the tops of the tires, and a boulder-covered muddy hill. In my experience, the P16 is a truck that can really struggle on inclines and tends to do kinda poorly in mud. But I guess maybe it's trying to show off for the sake of the video. But that's the toughest part of the P16's journey out of the way, so it should be a pretty quiet drive to the sawmill. The 1970s was the prime time of the logging industry in the Pacific Northwest. The first P16s were a huge hit and became a mainline model of Pacific. It would be upgraded with a V12 Detroit diesel, making 475 horsepower at 2100 RPMs and 1200 foot-pounds of torque at 1200 RPMs, when paired with a 5x4 twin-stick transmission. The Detroit diesel is actually a two-stroke, giving the P16 and trucks with it an iconic screaming sound. You could also get the same engine with the turbo as an option. With rear axles ranging from 90 to 106 inches wide, it had a 100-gallon fuel tank tucked behind a massive water tank that doubled as a cabin protector. This wall helped protect the driver from any cargo coming loose and rolling forward. Cargo shifting and massive logs sliding through the cabins of trucks on downhill stretches of roads were a worry in the early days of logging operations. The offset cab was an option, and a majority of buyers opted for it since it vastly improved the visibility of the truck. It also made maintenance a bit easier as you gained more access to the engine compartment. The truck could also be used for off-highway heavy cargo hauling, so logging specific equipment was also just an option. It wasn't something that just came with the truck. Things like the self-loading preload trailer, like what our mod can do, or the 400-gallon water tanks for the brakes. 400 gallons, that's 4 times as much gas as what's on board. But speaking of gas, even though the in-game truck only has an 80-gallon tank, it's a pretty fuel-efficient truck for its size and class, and can often do cross-map logging runs without the need for a support truck providing it fuel. Speaking of not needing a support truck, I made it to the sawmill. Something just looks right about a fully loaded P16 pulling up to a lumber mill. Imagine my surprise when somehow the employees here managed to turn all these logs into just 2 units of planks. The large logs made it difficult to see, so I actually spent a lot of my time in first-person mode. You can really see the offset cab in first person. It creates a sort of optical illusion that makes the hood look longer than it really is. So I have to be honest, I expected the P16 to fail. I was nearly certain that the hill at the beginning of its route was going to be enough for it to stall and need to be pulled up by another truck. The last time I used the P16, I actually sold it in frustration because it just kept getting stuck everywhere. I wonder if maybe I just learned how to drive it better, or if the advanced special gearbox helps that much. Or maybe the trailer is just really light. Well, now I gotta head out and find some more logs, since the station I just came from only had 1 load's worth. There's another station a little bit deeper in the woods by where I just came from, so I'm gonna refuel and head there. The forests of the Pacific Northwest in the 1970s and 80s were a battleground both in terms of logging companies and truck builders. Pacific wasn't the only one selling heavy-duty log haulers. In fact, the P16 was partially fashioned after a truck built by the company the founders of Pacific had left, the Hayes HDX that I had mentioned earlier. The HDX looks almost identical to the P16, down to the color scheme on some. Sifting through the internet, I always had to take a minute to actually read the badges on these trucks to confirm I was looking at the right one, because they're just so similar. They have similar features and shapes. Same offset cab, same slanted water tanks, same radiator guard mounted on the bumper just in front of the nose. It's so uncanny. But that wasn't the only competition. There was also Challenger trucks, producing a model that looks very similar. Or how about the Mack CL350? There were tons of these trucks running around. They were all over the Pacific Northwest in the 70s and 80s. What set Pacific apart, despite being a smaller company, was their commitment to build quality and flexibility, being able to alter the smallest detail on their trucks to fit the buyer's needs. Pacifics were intentionally built to last and be very operator conscious. The steering gears are placed high on the frames to allow for quick steering. All the electrical connections are fashioned with nut and bolt closed eyelet fasteners, and all the air and drive lines are gathered together instead of hanging loose to prevent premature wear from friction. The trucks didn't really change much throughout the years, because once Pacific made something, it just worked. While the P16 and other trucks in Pacific's lineup had sales brochures to show off their specifications, you could get your P16 built with your preferred motor, whether that be upgrading to the V16 Detroit, or going for a Cummins, or maybe even a Cat. You'll see more about the extent Pacific would go to for custom jobs when we talk about the P12. I'm close to the next logging station, but this is my only path to it. I mean, not really. I could go all the way around, but by the time I did, I'd be pretty much out of gas, and I'm trying to do this in one go. Plus, I already gave the P16 an easy route. Why not put it to the test? The P16 became iconic for hauling impossibly large loads of logs, being capable of carrying loads of almost 400,000 pounds. These pictures don't even look real, but the P16 in-game is sometimes a really hard sell. The truck often falls behind in-game, struggling with the outlandishly harsh terrain we get dealt. The P16 isn't necessarily designed to be off-road capable. It was intended to be used on hard, packed, maintained dirt roads, not venturing off into the wilderness and climbing rocky, muddy hills. The P16 is good when it's on road it favors, but much of Snowrunner is not that, and for that reason, the P16 gets left in the dust of trucks with all-wheel drive, smaller turning circles, and more flexible suspension. It struggles in deep mud and has a hard time getting traction if the trail isn't flat, and it has serious issues with hills. The front suspension also has a bad habit of being way too bouncy for the truck's weight. The P16 feels underpowered because of the environment it's in mostly. I know it's an early game truck that you find for free and ready to go, and maybe it's balanced around being a free heavy-duty truck to get you started, but it has been a little disheartening to never see Sabre drop this truck a buff. It's one of the few trucks I would tell a new player to download a mod for before ever even using the vanilla truck. Yeah, why not put it to the test? So I got the Pacific good and stuck. The front bumper is bottomed out and pushing rocks, the driver's side tires are buried, the trailer is digging into the side of this path. So I know I said I expected the P16 to fail earlier, but this was unintentional. This was something that's tough no matter what. It's really weird to drive this truck because it'll just haul and mow over everything in its path. But one deep mud pit, one steep hill, and it becomes completely helpless. However, there are some positives that would potentially have you choose it over another truck. Its size. Now, it can be a disadvantage on narrow or winding roads, but despite being so large, it's still wider than it is tall, making it very stable. It's hard to tip, and it's heavy, so you're really going to want to make sure you don't do that. But heavy and stable makes it a great anchor to recover heavy trucks or trailers with. It'll have the power to get most trucks out of a ditch, and it can winch pretty much anything along behind it like it's not even there. Truthfully, the P16 wasn't a truck I used a whole lot. Once I completed Michigan and Alaska on my first playthrough, I'm pretty sure I sold it to find a better logging rig. I just thought of it as an underpowered truck that in SnowRunner's punishing terrain was just so frustrating to use at times. But with my research into the truck and the company, I've become a huge fan and will most likely use it a lot more now just because of that. Although I'll be sure to drive it a little bit smarter. Really quickly, let's go over the model and interior. The first detail on the P16 that I like is being able to see the piston and steering arm. Looking at this part of the truck also gives you a good idea of how the P16 frame was just built out of steel beams. I was really surprised to learn that the cabin protector and the water tank were kinda together as one unit. I thought this whole thing was just a cabin protector, but combining them is really smart because the water acts like one of those barrels on the freeway that can be filled up with water or sand. It absorbs a lot of energy if something were to run into it and helps protect the driver. And of course, one side of the hood is open to reveal a V12 turbo Detroit diesel. Although there's these strange rubber U-shaped mounts on the hood. I have no clue what those are for, so if you do, please let me know. Moving on to the interior, and there's some interesting stuff. The first is this massive truck's tiny and awkward shifter. Look at it. It just juts out of the floor. There's a lever on the ceiling that says low air reset. I don't know enough about truck air systems to know exactly what that means, but I like that it has a little Sabre logo on it. On the center of the dash, there's a switch for the diff lock, which I wish Sabre would let us turn off to save the P16's turning circle. I find it interesting that the oil pressure is the most prominent gauge, but I guess it makes sense. Hauling these massive loads, you want to make sure you're not overstressing the motor. You can see a switch for water to cool the brakes. And we can see that our P16 has 300,000 operating hours and 62,000 kilometers. So this truck, like most Pacifics, has been around for a while. Continuing our history lesson. Coming into the 1970s, Pacific kept growing. The company was becoming well known in the region as a real player in the trucking industry. And in August of 1970, International Harvester would acquire 100% of Pacific Truck and Trailer. At the time, there was nothing to worry about. International was an industry giant and looked well on its way to building a truck and machinery empire. International pretty much let Pacific continue operating as normal, doing very little to interfere or sway the direction of the company. One thing International brought with them were connections. And around this era, Pacific began selling trucks outside of North America. Their trucks gained popularity in New Zealand. They sold trucks to clients in Hawaii, the Philippines, India, and Africa. So if you're like me and sometimes separate your fleets by region, Pacific is one of those manufacturers that could reasonably be anywhere in the world. Specifically the P12, as it was seen as Pacific's bread and butter. I didn't really talk about the route the P512 and P12 have to take, did I? They're both starting at the logging station in Grainwoods River. They have to cross the river, drive along the beach, and take some muddy, narrow trails up to the sawmill. Technically, there is an easier way around with the road, but as you've seen, I gotta put them to the test. First up is the staple of Pacific, and also its Swiss Army knife, the 1973 P12. The 1973 P12 truly showcases the lengths that Pacific would go to for custom jobs, as there were more custom P12s built than I think any other model. A little bit of trivia about this truck. In Snowrunner's promotional material, the P12 was modeled after the W roughneck trim, and for some reason, before the final release, the model was slightly altered and was just branded as a standard P12, despite still having the roughneck badging on it for some reason, and not quite looking like a standard P12. It's hard to tell just from its old store picture before the 7.0 update, but you can see the cab and the windshield are different. But anyway, my P12 has the largest engine and the advanced special gearbox. Unlike the P16 and upcoming P512 that have special grippy tires, spoilers, the P12 has unique all-terrain tires, because someone is going to use those, and it has the twin-motor heavy winch. This truck is pretty varied in its add-on choices. You can outfit it with either of the heavy cranes, a log crane and carrier, the multi-purpose cargo unit, a repair add-on, the metal detector, and medium and short logs. I don't think I've ever delivered short logs. And of course the fuel and water tanks. It can still attach a trailer with the medium log bunk, so it makes it one of the few trucks that can do 2 loads of medium logs. if you aren't using mods, of course. And while I've always thought that this truck just looks odd with anything besides a log bunk, the P12 in real life was an everything truck, from dump trucks to cement trucks, and of course, logging. It does have an oddly small cabin protector you can put on it. I mean, it's just the universal one and it doesn't cover the whole cab, so to me it looks wrong. And also, if you put any of the tire pack tires on it, it messes up the offset of the front axle, which is pretty annoying that still hasn't been fixed yet. But one advantage the P12 has over the other Pacifics is that it's all-wheel drive. So let's see how it's doing on its logging run. The journey started off kind of funny, having to bulldoze my way through all these small trees. Crossing the river was easy, the water barely reached the top of the tires, and overall, the P12 seemed pretty unaffected by it. Finding my way up though just led to me wandering around the beach trying to find the easiest path. I actually didn't scout this route completely when I decided on this video idea, so I didn't really have a plan. But the P12 is really struggling on even just the first bit of an ascending trail. It's really having a hard time hauling this load. I've been having to winch most of my way up. Hopefully it gets to more favorable terrain soon. The P12 gets its namesake the same way the P16 did. Its frame is made out of 12-inch steel beams. So, researching the P12 was actually a bit of a chore, because there was another model, the P10, which you guessed it, is made out of 10-inch steel beams, that looks nearly identical to the P12. And I thought I was driving myself crazy trying to find the correct pictures of it because the offset cab isn't an option that's exclusive to the P16. So all of these trucks look really similar. So I'm not 100% certain that all the pictures I'm showing in this section are definitely P12s, but I'm like 90% positive. So forgive me for making any mistakes. But of course, the P12 has some confusing naming conventions as well. The standard P12 was basically just a scaled down P16. I mean, they look almost exactly the same, but you can tell something is a little off. Functionally, these served the same purpose as the P16, just with less load capacity. There was the P12W Roughneck, which again, despite the name and slight model change, is the model we have in game. The main differences in this model were the increased frame length, which was intended for applications like dump trucks and oil field deck rollers, and it came with larger tires. Here are some pictures of two Roughnecks that were a part of a fleet for a coal mine in Soda Springs, Idaho. Reportedly, they were outfitted with the turbocharged V16 Detroit diesels and would routinely haul loads of 250 tons. The P12W3s were really similar to Roughnecks, but designed for off-highway oversized hauling. The P12 seemed to be Pacific's mainline model in the mid-70s and 80s, still using the trusty Detroit diesel Pacific was so fond of. The P12 wasn't typically sold with the twin-stick manuals, instead being advertised with a 6-speed Allison. Just real quick, I find it hilarious that in some of the videos I've made, I've really struggled to find any information of substance to put in it, yet I can tell you guys how many BTUs the heater on the P16 and the P12 are thanks to the sales brochures I found. It's 34,000 if you were wondering. But anyway, Pacific never had the desire to be a large-scale truck manufacturer. They'd found their niche in custom, specialized jobs. Big companies couldn't make small design changes and suggestions because changing assembly line procedures was just way too costly. Pacific's flexibility is what made them strong and desirable, and capable of building some really incredible machines. The P12W3 Ultra is probably the most famous example of the lengths Pacific would go to create custom trucks for their clients. The Ultras were monsters, designed specifically for the South African Railway Company to haul parts of thermal power plants that could weigh up to 370 tons. These trucks were designed to operate in a road train fashion, with 4 or more of them strung together, transporting loads that took up the entire roadway and required police escorts, having to communicate over the radio to coordinate gear changes, and sometimes even sleeping in the trucks during long multi-day hauls. Officially, only 5 of the 24 of these trucks that were made were actually called Ultras, and that was the main pushers and pullers that were equipped with 800 horsepower, 27-liter Cummins V12s, while the rest only had 600 horsepower engines. These trucks show the dedication Pacific had in making sure its clients received the right tools for the job, as Pacific refused to even consider building anything until their manager of sales, engineering, and product development went to South Africa himself. These trucks were absolute mammoths, weighing around 50 tons, carrying 475 gallons of gas, They had radiators that were nearly 6 feet tall. You can see this one has a small onboard crane. Remarkably, they're still in service to this very day, to a different company with a different paint scheme. They're often paired with other newer trucks, but being 50 years old and still in somewhat regular use should be an absolute testament to Specific's quality and durability. But even if something does break, sourcing parts isn't impossible, but we'll get into that later. How's our P12 doing? It's doing terrible. I feel like I've been slowly pulling myself through these woods for an hour. This truck does not have the guts for this trail. Part of the way up, I thought maybe it was struggling because I was asking it to pull 3 loads of logs instead of the 2 the devs intended for it. So I unpacked the logs and got rid of 1 load, and the difference was negligible. You could say maybe the trailer was too heavy, but I've used these mod trailers for a while, and in my experience, they actually kind of feel lighter. This drive was awful. The P12 really struggles to move. It doesn't even spin the tires when it's stuck. It just stops dead in its tracks. I had to winch and crawl through almost the entire trail, aside from the bridge section. And then the truck nearly got stuck on like the 10-degree grade to get up into the sawmill. I've never used the P12. Actually, that's not true. I literally just used it to get the thumbnail for my Snowrunners for Masochist video. But that's actually it. Despite its complete lack of a desire to move under its own power, the P12 made it to the sawmill with 5 gallons of gas left, and it left the logging station with a full tank. That's just how long my foot was to the floor trying to get this thing to move. To wrap up the P12, let's of course go over the model and interior. As I said earlier, the P12 in-game has roughneck badges despite not being a roughneck model. It seems like an odd compliment to give something, but I like that you can see the detail of the exposed wires behind the actual headlights themselves. That's a cool detail. And I think it's a bit odd that the exhaust dumps right next to the gas tank. Like, I know a lot of trucks have the exhaust going over the gas tank, but seeing it just dump right next to it looks weird to me. I don't know why. Something about it looks dangerous. The interior has a lot in common with the P16. It's got the same goofy shifter, the same air pressure lever on the roof, and very similar steering wheels. Look at that. The mesh for this texture is wrong. You can see all the squares that are supposed to be around the numbers. I like that all the Pacific trucks have wood on the dash. It's a very classy touch. Oh, and it does have an engine model. It's just an extremely low quality model. Generic engine shaped, but the bad texture gives it a little face on the front. So yeah, I never really used the P12, and honestly after this performance, probably still won't. At least not for hauling logs. I see it getting some use as a heavy-duty service truck. Of course, it's not the P12's fault. It suffers from the same thing the P16 does. A lack of any kind of buff from the devs. It just gets completely surpassed by stronger DLC counterparts. I mean, what can the P12 do that the Taiga 6455 can't, besides attach the largest crane? Learning all the history I have about Pacific, I want to use their trucks in-game, so I'll most likely end up downloading a mod for a stronger P12. It really just needs more power. On to the final truck, the P512PF. My 512 is equipped with its largest engine upgrade and the off-road gearbox. I kept the stock tires, since they're supposed to have a higher grip rating than any other tires you can throw on this truck. It's a good thing it has special tires, because like the P16, this truck isn't all-wheel drive, and you can only engage the diff lock in low. Despite that, it's actually a pretty good truck. I used it a decent bit finishing up Wisconsin. I mean, I mostly used it as a crane truck, but it felt stable and never got stuck the whole time I used it that way. So this is the first time it's going to be doing some true hauling. And following the P12, I hope it does a better job. I'm going to be taking the exact same route as I did with the P12 to make sure it's a fair comparison. Although I am starting the trip with only 2 loads of logs instead of 3. Now, after everything we've learned, what is this truck? It's a P500. Yeah, it looks like a P12, doesn't it? So the P500 series started in 1975 and went through 1991. In typical naming fashion, the 510 meant it had a 10-inch thick frame, and the 512 meant it had a 12-inch thick frame. However, they were split into 2 submodels, the PS and the PF. This one that I showed before is a P512 PS, meaning it has a steel hood and fenders. The PF meant that it has a fiberglass hood and fenders. The PS, the steel one, was meant for off-highway use. It was intended to be out in the bush, doing the same things the P16 and the P12 were. Hence why it looks bulkier, beefier, and once again makes it difficult to know exactly which model you're looking at because they all look so similar. The PF, the fiberglass one, was intended to be a more road-going, typical highway truck. That doesn't mean it was any less capable or never straight off of paved roads, but these trucks were typically found in more tame environments. And these trucks are absolutely beautiful. The paint jobs on them are amazing. And the promotional material? I want every single one as a poster. I love them. Now, I'm not saying none of them exist, but the 512 PF might be a bit of a Frankenstein truck that the developers put together for the game. As I've been researching these trucks and looking at pictures, I've been looking at the gallery section of PacificTruckClub.org, which has each individual picture uploaded and labeled with which model it is, and sometimes even some history if you click on them. There doesn't seem to be any 12-inch frame 500s with a fiberglass nose uploaded to this site. I would imagine that the 12-inch frame trucks were the heavy-duty logging trucks, and that there wasn't really a desire to have one with a fiberglass front end that would just end up getting cracked in the harsher environment. So the real-life version of the in-game truck is most likely a 510, as if there is a 512 with fiberglass, it isn't documented in a way that I can find. Interestingly enough, just to add to the confusion, during the time International owned the company, some models were built with modified International Paystar cabs as opposed to in-house built Pacific cabs. See how I snuck the Paystar in as my loading truck? You thought that was just a random choice, didn't you? There's really only one way to tell the difference with the naked eye. If the top of the windshield lines up with the top of the windows on the door, then it's an International cab. If it doesn't, and the windshield is taller, it's a Pacific cab. So how's the 512 doing so far? Absolutely fantastic. The river crossing was nothing. The tires were completely nearly submerged, but the truck was unaffected. Getting onto the trail, I realized right away that throwing it in low is just useless for some reason. Like, the truck just stops, so you have to throw it in low plus for pretty much the whole thing. It did get stuck in some of the same places the P12 did. This trail has some pretty deep ruts, and the 512 has a much lower ride height, so it bottomed out once or twice. But once it got unstuck, it just kept chugging along. With the introduction of the P500, Pacific began advertising them in sales brochures with the 14.6-liter 500 horsepower Caterpillar engines. This advertisement with an all-yellow 510 looks awesome. But of course, you could get a Cummins or the Detroit diesel. Pacific would play all sides in the engine game, as their production numbers weren't large enough to warrant staying loyal to one brand. But they liked to be ahead of the curve the best they could when it came to new technology. An article I read stated that when Cummins unveiled its NTC 444 engine at the Canadian Truck Show, a Pacific P10 was already at the show with one in it. With all those engine options, the buyers had a choice of a few transmissions, such as the 6-speed Allison or 15-speed twin stick. So information on the P500 in particular is a bit sparse and confusing for 3 reasons. The first is that there may not have been that many of them produced. Production numbers on all of these trucks are a bit unclear, but that's because in total, Pacific only made 2,308 of these trucks over its 44-year production run. That's an incredibly small number for a company that sold its trucks internationally. But that's why the passionate group of Pacific enthusiasts on the heavy equipment forums are able to keep track of them and refer to them by their VIN numbers. The second reason is that the P500 had a few more special variants. There were multiple twin-steer versions of the 512 made, from cement and dump trucks to oil-field rollbacks that made them look like a Western Star twin-steer. 4 of these twin-steer cement mixers were made for a company in British Columbia in 1987, and at the time that the article I was reading was written, in 2008, it stated that all of those trucks were still in service. Pacific actually built twin-steer variants of the P12 and P16 as well. I just wanted to wait till this part of the video to bring that up. On top of that, they made a few tri-drive trucks as well, meaning they had 3 rear axles. Again, Pacific being such a small-scale company, they could make these massive changes to their trucks like it was no big deal. But these were not mainline models that I can really research and give specs on. Most of these may have had less than 5 of them made. But every Pacific truck delivered to a customer comes with its own service manual, made by the engineering department that produced it. And I just wish some of those owners of the more custom models had bothered to keep those service manuals, or knew that there was a community of people online that would love if they were scanned and uploaded. The 512 made it to the sawmill without breaking a sweat. Compared to the P12 struggle, this truck ran like a champ. There were a few areas where I had to winch the 512, but it wasn't crawling along like the previous truck was. It was still pretty fuel heavy though. That brief journey ate up a little over half the gas tank, but hauling the same load, being lower to the ground and not having all-wheel drive, yet the P512 outperformed the P12 by a ton. Here's the best part. Because I had the HUD off for recording, I never put the diff lock on because I forgot. Don't sleep on this truck. It takes a little bit of experimentation to understand what terrain it's going to struggle in without all-wheel drive and which it'll be fine in. But once you're comfortable with it, well, it becomes pretty comfortable and easy to drive. Before I continue the Pacific history lesson, let's poke around the P512's model and interior. There really isn't a whole lot interesting on the outside of the truck, other than me wanting to compliment the devs on the detail put into the modeling of the airlines, but they do that on a lot of trucks. The interior is very similar to the P12. Same wood panel wraparound dash. I love that all the Pacifics have wood on the dashes. But it has the same steering wheel, same low air reset, same gauges, even has the same operating hours and kilometers as the P16. It does have a different shifter though, and I like the leather on this interior. I don't know what you call this texture exactly, but it's very classy. And surprisingly, to my disappointment, there's no engine modeled under this hood. It's just a black void, like a textureless model that just screws with the camera when you clip it into it. So, that's going to wrap up the in-game truck section of this video, but I'm still going to continue telling the rest of Pacific's history. But let's round up my experience so far. The P16 is a really good truck to have early on. It can dominate the base game maps so long as you know where you can take it. It's forgiving on fuel and really hard to tip. It gets outclassed later on by similar sized trucks with all-wheel drive, and I think you should download TWM's log mod to make it look cooler. The P12 it's a cool truck in real life that I feel like should really be a superstar in Snowrunner. While it can equip tons of add-ons, its performance is underwhelming, and I'd go as far to say completely unimmersive. It just has no power, and I think you should download a mod to buff it. I know I'm going to. The P512 is an incredibly balanced and capable truck. It can handle all the add-ons besides the heavy cranes. It has a low ride height, which can be a benefit in some areas. It has a respectable fuel tank and consumption rate, and the special grippy tires make this truck able to conquer things you'd think it really wouldn't be able to. Although it isn't unlocked until Wisconsin, it is definitely worth the trip. And finally, the long-awaited third reason information is somewhat confusing on the P500s. A good number of them were sold internationally. In 1981, International was feeling the stress of its financial drought and sold Pacific to Inchcape Berhad in Singapore. Inchcape was a large company that had investments in lots of different sectors. They wanted to acquire a truck manufacturer to supply the Eurasian market, as well as provide trucks for their own mining facilities in places like the Philippines and Indonesia. In fact, despite being so recognized for supplying the Pacific Northwest with logging trucks, only about 60 of the trucks were sold in Canada, while the other 40% were exported. But Pacific being sold to Inchcape was the beginning of the end. The company was fine until 1987, whereafter their new owners outsourced all fabrication and left the factory to do assembly only. The downturn in the Canadian economy was one factor. Another was the mounting environmental pressure the logging industry as a whole was facing. Those incredible pictures of Pacific's hauling loads bigger than buildings are wonderful eye candy, and really feel like a triumphant testament to the way man can conquer this world. But the reality was, we were destroying centuries-old, sometimes ancient trees that had been standing for a couple hundred years. These were referred to as first growth trees, and while the wood was high quality and highly desirable, there was no doubt in the harm that was being done to ecosystems. That's part of the reason large logging trucks like Pacific fell out of style. Most logging in the modern day is done on controlled forests that are tended to and cut down once they reach an appropriate age. The sites themselves tend to have more infrastructure as opposed to just harvesting in the wilds. The downturn in the economy and less companies buying trucks meant Pacific simply, quietly, closed its doors in 1991. Kind of. The company shifted to Pacific Truck Parts, making and selling replacement parts for its models to keep the promise of reliability and quality. However, in 1995, a man who wanted a P12W3 for his mine in Idaho practically beat down Pacific door wanting a truck built. The company agreed, but only if the man paid in full in advance. On May 26, 1995, the final Pacific was finished. Built by a team of passionate individuals in the back of a parts warehouse, a development so unexpected a wall had to be knocked down to release the massive truck. Parading it around the nearby streets, laughs and smiles all around. One worker simply saying, "We've done well." 3 years ago, someone commented on that video, saying that the truck is still in service at that Idaho mine and in great condition, and I hope it continues that way for many more years. The ending to Pacific's story isn't completely somber. A company with a legacy like theirs leaves a mark on people. It certainly did for all of those people involved in building, selling, and operating them. In 2002, a company called Coast Powertrain bought everything you would need to build a new Pacific from scratch. All the blueprints, the molds, the jigs, the templates. As of now, the company is the sole provider of any replacement parts and have been known to build and restore trucks. There was talk of them potentially restarting the brand and building entirely new trucks themselves, but for whatever reason, perhaps cost or potentially just the lack of a market, they haven't. But if you own a Pacific, whether it be a twin steer, a tri-drive, or an Ultra, they'll make you the exact part they need. In a world where products are often designed with planned obsolescence in mind, Pacific's philosophy was refreshingly different. As one sales vice president put it, "I almost wish these trucks would wear out. Then we'd sell more." The scope of this project just kept getting bigger and bigger the more research I did. One thing would lead to another, that would lead to another. But it was incredibly fun to research and is part of the reason that I love making these videos. The stories I read and the pictures I came across were nothing short of awesome. I'll have all my sources linked below, and I highly recommend you check them out. I had originally planned to do a comment response at the end of this video, but it's already way too long. I've never recorded this long before. My voice hurts so much. But I'll do that in the next video, I promise. In the meantime, tell me about your experiences with any of these trucks, or any history you know about the company, or things that I potentially got wrong because there's a lot of research and confusion while I was writing. But how do you normally use each truck? Is the P12 as bad as it seemed in this video? Like, actually? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And once again, if you haven't already, I humbly ask that you like this video to help push it in front of more people. I put a lot of work into it, and I would really appreciate it. But that's going to be all from me, guys. I'll see you in the next one. And sold Pacific to Itchcape Burhad. That's stupid. In 1981, International was feeling the stress of its financial drought and sold Pacific to Itchcape Burhad. That does not roll off the tongue well. Itchcape Burhad. I'm just going to call it Itchcape. Now Nova's digging in her litter box. Nova! Settle it. You always do this. Every time I record, you get up here. You can get in my lap if you're quiet. Come here. You can get in my lap if you're quiet, but that's it. Okay? What the Nova, get off my desk. Yes, you're not behaving. Jesus. The same air pressure level on the roof. The same air pressure lever. What the hell?